earlier is black folks begging.
Yeah. See, I don't. I'm not that vested into knowing all the intricacies of his healthcare program. I stayed
Mm,
away from that.
mm,
And but what he could have done some other things that could have balanced that out
mm,
if he had focused on trying what Martin Luther King should have focused on, redistributing some resources in the black folks' hand,
mm,
so they can begin to acquire a better lifestyle. And see, and that's the problem. See,
mm,
it's not civil rights, it's not social integration that
mm,
determines the quality of life.
mm,
And because see, right now it's what you own and control. Black folk who own and control 1% they haven't got a snowball's chance of getting any insurance or getting anything else that's quality based.
I have a good friend whose mantra is what he says the king's position was towards the latter part of his life, and that is proportional economics.
That's he started getting into that right before he got assassinated,
Yeah.
about 3 or 4 months. Martin Luther said, I've come to learn that after 10 years, that's they cannot have real true social integration unless you have economic integration, and you cannot have economic integration unless you go back and redistribute some of the wealth, resources, and opportunities into the hands of black folk.
Mhm.
But he said that, unfortunately, he said, I've learned that, but it's a little late then. But he spent 10 years pushing everybody's wagon, pushing diversity, multicultural, and taking care of the world, and for blacks to be altruistic and to subject themselves to abuses, to take physical abuse, and rather than saying, no, we don't need to go back and rebuild these black communities and give them more resources.
So we've got about 10 minutes left, man. That's how fast this time has gone by. Let's start to discuss. This is what you just described is a deep, dark hole.
That it is.
Unfortunately, I think it would be difficult for anyone to argue with some of your analysis here. Much of what you're talking about is rooted in obvious reality. Given that that's the case, let's please start that we can't leave here without some hope, to start thinking about what you as such a veteran observer, economist, someone who has paid attention to this arc. Let's start talking about some solutions.
Oh, I love that. That's my favorite thing. And the solution, there are several things you can do very quickly. First of all, black folk need understanding what you're saying, that they are in a deep dark hole. Okay, and they're locked in that deep dark hole by some institution. The first institution is the United States Constitution.
Mm-hmm.
That's got them locked in box. Mm-hmm. And nobody's ever raised any issue about the United States Constitution.
And so I'm going to ask you, because you talk about it in the book. I really, they ain't got to buy your book. They maybe go to the library. They need to read your book, man. This book needs to be read, people. So you talk about the Constitution a little bit. You talk a little bit about the dark side.
Right.
Give us a little bit of that, and then we want to come back and talk about solutions.
Okay, good. And see, the dark side, the Constitution was written to be the first affirmative action plan in the entire United States. Mm-hmm. But nobody understands it. It's an affirmative action plan for whites, okay? Mm-hmm. And what they're saying is that these people, and we're going to make sure these people are locked in box. And so we're going to build this Constitution based on two things. Mm-hmm. We're going to use a whole body of people to enrich us, to bring comfort to us, and at the same time we're going to talk about everybody having equal opportunity, being the land of freedom. Sure. But we're going to shut these people down. They're not going to have any freedom. Yeah. And so before they drew the Constitution up in 17,
hold it, because there's just something there that it's just like boom,
Okay.
And because that's like to use the language of Don King, mm-hmm. the boxing promoter. That's the original trickeration.
That's right.
That's the original trick.
That's it. And the Constitution is based upon all these. What it is based. It was based on trickery, because what they did, they set it up so they met. It's in Philadelphia in 1789. They met there and said, "Here's what we're going to do. We're going to start writing this Constitution, and what we're going to do. But how do we justify bringing all these people here looking for free land and free Indian land and free black labor to get unearned benefits? At the same time, we're going to talk about that all people have a right to life, liberty, and pursuit." And they said initially it said property, yeah. but Thomas Jefferson said we can't say property. Let's go back into the Constitution and rewrite it and say happiness. Yeah. See, because look, so they started bamboozling and said nobody's coming across the country, coming around the world just to look for happiness in America. They were coming to look for free, unearned benefits. So what they said, well, here's the trick we're gonna do. We're gonna write this document. They spent a whole week with the doors locked, the shutters drawn. Say, how do we write a constitution that's gonna lock blacks in and nobody to recognize it? So what they said, here's what we do in the Constitution. Let's use coded language. They said that one coded language for whites and a coded language to talk about black folk. And so in the Constitution, we talk about all people. They talk about whites. We say citizens. They talk about whites. When they say so they use those kind of language and the people. When they say the people, they talk about whites. Blacks were property. So when the Constitution says the people and all the people, they're talking about whites. Blacks are property, and they're classified as equal to an animal. So when you talk about in the Constitution, look at it and read it. It says when we talk about black folk, it says those who are in bondage, those who are indebted, those who have specific property, that specific group of people, those who at unhappily lot. They're talking about black folks. They use it, and they say always use coded language. And bring it up to date right quick so I can get off this point. I know the time is running out. See, Ronald Reagan told the country the same thing when he came into office in '82. See, when I left the White House with President Carter, with his administration, when Reagan came in, one of the first things he did, he called Haldeman into the office and said, when you start talking about black issues in America, make sure you use coded language. He said, never say anything specifically, solely, directly against black. He said, what you do is use a very broad, ambiguous language. He says, and the jigs.
Welfare queen.
The jigs, they'll never know what you're talking about. Use very broad words like minority, poor folk, people of color. That way they never know they ain't going to get a darn thing out of it. We can hide it. So they use hidden codes to be able in the Constitution to define what whites would get, what immigrants would get, and nothing that black people are going to get. Okay? That coding is still being used today to talk about diversity, multicultural. People of color. They're saying, let's pretend that black folk don't exist. And no public policy is going to say specifically for black folk. Nothing going to address them. And that's what not one president in the United States, including Obama, has ever done anything specifically and solely to address the needs of black folk. Not one politician. As soon as a politician goes and gets in office, even if he's black, first thing you say is that I got to represent all the people. I got to represent everybody. I can't do anything for black folk. But I can do things for Jews, Arabs, Asians, Hispanics, midgets, handicapped, transgenders, anything. But I can never do anything for black folk. So what that does, it freezes black folk in the lowest level of a real life monopoly game.
And so now let's talk about some solutions.
Okay, now the solution, the first thing I would tell black folk do is understand, declare yourself to be a native people, native blacks. You're the oldest population here. Point two, and then and declare your exceptionality. Say that you're entitled to things that have never been given to you. That you're exceptional people and you've been mistreated and maltreated. And say, and because of that, don't include me in these very broad, ambiguous groups. Get out of affirmative action. I have the dubious honor of writing the first affirmative action plan in the United States in 1970-71 for the state of Florida. I wrote that plan not for minorities, I wrote it for black folk, but it was diluted and watered down and corrupted. About 6 or 7 months after I wrote it, it went all over the country, saying it was for affirmative action for all people. And so I want blacks to get out of affirmative action and go for reparations.
I was getting ready to say that very clearly.
That's right.
You're saying affirmative action. Get away from that.
Get away from
start talking specifically, succinctly about reparations.
That's right. And then put your own self-interest first. Quit trying to be altruistic and trying to represent everybody. Every time there's a march for anybody, you out there marching, leading the parade. You start saying, no, I'm gonna put my interest first, because and understand that God sent you here black. Blackness is your badge of honor, is your exceptionality, it's your course to get out of this problem. Then what you do, then you say, I want to also rebuild my own communities. Go back and rebuild your own communities, rebuild your own, and in those communities, do what you had before the 1960s. Rebuild, you put your own businesses in there. So and right now, we do not have not one single community in America. All we got are black neighborhoods, and everybody else got communities. You cannot be a competitive group with neighborhoods. You got to have communities. And every group coming to America, the first thing they do in the West Coast, the Japanese, Asian, Arabs, anybody, they say, first thing we're going to do is build communities. We're going to find somebody that look like us, build us a community. So you got Arab towns, Koreatown, Chinatown, Japantown, little Saigons, you got little Havanas, little Hialeahs, you got little Italy, you got Greek town, Pole town, Hockey town, any kind of, but you never find a black town because we are integrated. And integration means you scattered and lost your power and your resources. And you cannot run a business with scattered resources. It can't be done. So you build your own communities, and a community is where you store your value, your culture, your history, your tax base, your jobs, and your employment opportunities. You store them in your own communities. That's why 98% of all these other groups They have their own communities, spend their money with their own people. We got it backwards. We spend out, we work, we go to other people's community, we go to other people's jobs to help them. And only 2% of the blacks in America work in their own community, in their own neighborhoods for their own people and got jobs. And so you got to build these communities, and you start practicing group economics and group politics. You pull out all the parties, build your own black independent parties, move away from the Republican Party, pull out the Democratic Party, because neither one of them have your interests at heart, and create your own parties, but don't run any candidates. So we will vote for any candidate in the National Black Independent Party who will promise the most and deliver resources to black folk to correct the structural inequity we're into. That's that, and I go through. Keep your money with your own people, hire your own people, practice group economics from the bottom to the top.
You know, man, so if we were to go back 50 or 60 years and look at how mainstream media portrayed the emergence of Martin Luther King, you know, they sanitized him as best they could and turned him into the dreamer. You have given some voice to that. Perhaps, you know, that there should have been a much greater focus on economic interest.
That's right.
And there was social and integration. And if you look at, though, as to how he became sort of to emerge as a darling of the media, the dreamer, if you will, and you look at the same time, someone who was attempting to do what you're talking about then, you look at Elijah Muhammad, and you look at how he was vilified as a lunatic. If we play make-believe here just for a moment, if you talk about the policies, the strategy of Elijah Muhammad to say, do for yourself and build your own communities. And if we had now 50 or 60 years of that versus this piece, the integration piece, which is so diluted, man, it's just difficult not to look back at it and say, what if?
Yes, that you should say that throughout history. The question would be not only with that, the question would be, what would America look like right now if you never had blacks in here as slaves? What would America look like today if you didn't have them to build the roads, pick the cotton, to build it? They were the people they were the engines that drove the economic development of this country. What would this country look like if they never could have done it? There's no way this country could have ever been built without the black slaves doing it for them. And so,
and so just on that point right there, on that point right there, if one is to say that that's a valid point, then there should be a straight line with anything, entity, person, or otherwise that talks about equality. There's a straight line into reparation. If that's the case, then there should be a straight line.
There should be a restraint. But see, but what happens is that you got in the social order, that social construct, that there is pushback against anything, because see, the dominant society and all those subcategories of ethnic groups, they don't want you to do that, because right now all the ethnic group, the dominant white society, the Hispanics, Arabs, and Asians, they're living off of two incomes. They're living off of 100% of their own money because they keep it confined to their communities. They don't have to go to blacks, and they live off of 98% of blacks' money. So every group in this country lives off of double incomes. 198% blacks have forced to live off of 2%. That they can't make it because they're spending their money in stores and businesses that don't belong to them. And so the issue in the conclusion is that the issue I'm saying to you is not hating anybody. See, black folk, I'm not against any immigrants. What I'm against is the racist immigration policies that have kept black folk locked and boxed outside the system for over 460 years. And for black folk, got to learn how to compete. And the other problem they got is that they got to understand that if once they start trying to compete, the dominant white society is going to push back because they say, "You're taking money out of my pocket. I got 198% now, and you only got 2%. Right. And so I'm opposed to your change, begging about any change.
Power concedes nothing without a struggle. Never has.
That's right.
Will.
And also power has no feelings about morality or justice. I see black folk march street talk. We're marching for justice. Power doesn't care about justice. It doesn't care about morality. It can talk about who owns and controls the resources. And the last thing I'm saying to you in conclusion is that you don't get any pushback from the dominant white society, or being from the black overclass, is because 98% of them have already received meritorious manumission. They've already been set free. They're getting benefits, what they call performance-based income. And they're scared to death to do anything that might align them with black folk in the country.
As Dick Gregory would say, the struggle continues.
That's right.
Thank you so much for being here. This is the